Welcome to Lecture 25, where we will discuss ecosystems and restoration ecology. In addition to monitoring how much energy is produced by a system, we can also measure how energy is transferred within a system. Secondary production refers to the amount of chemical energy from a consumer's food source that is converted into new biomass for a specific time period. However, note that this is usually inefficient, as most material from the plants are not consumed or not considered to be a usable form of energy. Production efficiency is the percentage of energy that is stored in assimilated food that is used for growth or reproduction. Note that production efficiency does not account for the energy that is used for respiration. Production efficiency can be defined as the net secondary production level or value times 100% divided by the assimilation or cost of primary production. This slide depicts the energy transfer, energy partitioning in food chains. We have a caterpillar that consumes a large amount of plant material. Even though it consumes, in this example, approximately 200 joules, most of this is going to be lost as feces and not assimilated into the system or lost through cellular respiration. This means that the production efficiency lays at about 33%. This is because approximately 33 out of the 100 joules that are used for assimilation are actually used for growth and reproduction. In general, endotherms have very low production efficiency rates that sit about 1 to 3%. This is because most of their energy is used to maintain body temperatures. Ectotherms, like fish, have slightly higher values that lay around 10%. Trophic efficiency is defined as the percentage of production that is transferred between trophic levels. As discussed previously, trophic efficiency is very low. This means that only approximately 10% of the energy is transferred between trophic levels. This is because much of the energy is lost in respiration or lost in the production of feces. Trophic efficiency can generally be represented by creating energy pyramids, as seen to the slide on the right. Note that the primary producers only convert approximately 1% of the energy from the sun into energy that is usable for the system. This, remember, will often limit the size of the food chain or the food web that can be supported by the primary producers. We can also study the production of biomass within an ecosystem to get an idea of how productive it is. Biomass pyramids will represent the total dry mass of all organisms within each trophic level. Most of these pyramids narrow very sharply as you increase trophic level. This is a result or consequence of inefficient energy transfer. In some aquatic systems, however, primary consumers consume the primary producers at such high rates that the biomass of the consumers is much greater. This is because, although there is a distinct and large amount of primary producers with respect to their biomass, that biomass is quickly consumed and will transfer up the system. We are now going to examine how water and nutrients cycle in ecosystems. Though sunlight is abundant in most ecosystems and constantly being inputted into the system, most of the chemical elements are not. This means that they need to be recycled. Decomposition is an important process that helps to return many of these nutrients back into the ecosystem and frees them up to be used once again. Once the nutrients are broken down, they typically remain in the soil until they are assimilated by the surrounding vegetation. Once they are uptaken by the vegetation, they are then considered to be part of the ecosystem once again. In general, the rate of decomposition greatly increases with temperature as well as humidity. Thus, the decomposition rates in tropical regions occurs very quickly, thus leading to very short recycle times. Decomposition slows in environments that are too hot, too wet, or that are low in oxygen. This causes these areas to act as carbon stores as they store organic material. Peat bogs, for example, are cold and wet and also anaerobic, greatly slowing the rate of decomposition and acting as carbon sinks. The dry desert environment also quickly causes mummification. This prevents organic materials such as carbon and nitrogen from being recycled back into the system. In aquatic system, many of the nutrients will become lost. This is because as feces or as organisms die, they will form detritus at the bottom, where they then form sediments. This will then trap important nutrients, acting as a nutrient sink. However, changes in surface and lower water temperatures may cause internal currents that can lead to turnover events. This usually occurs in spring as well as fall. These turnover events are extremely important as they cause the upwelling of the lower waters. This will bring these nutrients that were formerly trapped back up to the surface to then be used by organisms that reside within the photic zone. Biogeochemical cycles occur when chemical elements move between living or biotic components and non-living components. This can occur over global as well as local scales. The nature of the element and how it cycles determines the exchange between living and non-living components. For instance, gaseous forms of carbon, oxygen, sulfur, and nitrogen will cycle globally. However, heavier elements such as phosphorus, calcium, and potassium tend to cycle locally on land or more broadly in aquatic systems. When examining biogeochemical cycles, it is important to understand what these diagrams represent. Biogeochemical cycles typically have reservoirs as well as arrows. Reservoirs depict where the element is found. This can either be in organic or inorganic form, or it can be available or unavailable for use. Arrows represent the biological, chemical, and geological processes that will cause the movement of the element between reservoirs. Note that within these images, time is not usually represented. Some of these processes may occur very quickly, while others may take a very long time. We will first examine the water cycle. Water is considered essential to all life on Earth and can greatly influence various ecosystem processes. Water can move through a system through the processes of evaporation, condensation, and precipitation. Freezing will generally make water unavailable in the system until it melts. Oceans are considered to be the main reservoir of water and hold over 97% of the entire water amount on Earth. As water evaporates over the lands and oceans and lakes, it will return into the system in the form of precipitation. It will also then percolate through the soil and return back to the waterways through runoff and groundwater. We will now examine the carbon cycle. Carbon is important as it provides a framework for organic molecules, thus allowing for energy to be transferred within a system. Inorganic carbon in the form of carbon dioxide is removed from the atmosphere and made into organic molecules or energy through the process of photosynthesis. These molecules will then be consumed by other organisms. Metabolic processes such as release carbon dioxide back into the atmosphere. Fossil fuels and wood are considered to be major carbon reservoirs until they are burned, releasing carbon dioxide into the environment. In addition, all organisms are considered to be reservoirs, as well as rocks, sediments, and detritus. Nitrogen is considered to be a limiting nutrient in both aquatic as well as terrestrial systems. Nitrogen is used to make proteins and nucleic acids. Inorganic forms of nitrogen, as seen here, can be used by plants as well as bacteria. Animals need to use organic forms of nitrogen in the form of amino acids. The atmosphere is considered to be a main reservoir for nitrogen, along with soils, sediments, water, as well as animal biomass. Nitrogen fixation is an important process that converts atmospheric nitrogen into usable forms. This is a major point of entry for nitrogen to enter into ecosystems. Phosphorus is also an important element to consider. Phosphorus is important in the manufacturing of bones, teeth, and cellular components such as nucleic acids, phospholipids, and energy. Inorganic phosphate can be taken up by producers and made into organic compounds. Reservoirs for phosphorus typically include sedimentary marine rocks, soils, and oceans. Phosphorus is returned to the soil through decomposition or excretion. Most cycling of phosphorus is considered localized, as it is readily bound in soils, though some runoff and leaching will occur to return this material to aquatic systems. An example of how important nutrient cycling is for ecosystems can be represented by the Hubbard Brook Experimental Forest. This forest is a deciduous forest that consists of 6 small valleys that are all drained by a single creek. Researchers have monitored over a long period of time the nutrient inputs and outputs of major nutrients within the system. They determined that internal cycling kept most of the nutrients within the ecosystem, meaning that most of the nutrients were not lost and were consistently being recycled within the ecosystem. However, clear cutting of one watershed drastically increased the amount of water and nutrients leaving the system, illustrating the devastating effects that deforestation can have. Ecosystems are fragile and can be significantly damaged by deforestation, farming, mining, chemical spills, as well as natural disturbances. One of the main goals of restoration ecology is to return an area to a more natural state. In some extreme cases, the physical environment may have to be entirely reconstructed. Biological restoration will help to bring the ecosystem as close as possible to the pre-disturbance state. This can be done through bioremediation or biological augmentation. In biological augmentation, organisms are used to add essential nutrients or materials to the environment. Bioremediation, on the other hand, involves the use of organisms to help detoxify ecosystems. By removing toxic materials, we can help restore the original state. In bioremediation, many organisms such as prokaryotes, fungi, and plants can help to detoxify or neutralize soils. This will make them more hospitable to other species. Some lichens, like Trapelia involuta, are adapted to grow in soils with high levels of heavy metals like lead and cadmium. When they grow in these areas, they will deposit these chemicals or elements in their tissue as they grow. This can be denoted by the black spots in the diagram below. These plants can then be grown and harvested to remove toxins from the ecosystem. The addition of Sharonella wanendosis and ethanol as a food source to uranium-contaminated groundwater can help to reduce the concentration of soluble uranium by over 80%. When examining the use or evaluating the use of biological augmentation for restoration ecology, a critical point is to identify which nutrients are limiting within an ecosystem's recovery. Oftentimes, plants and mycorrhizal symbionts like bacteria and fungi can make it easier for other plants or organisms to colonize. This will then speed up the successional pathway to recovery. Animals may be released into areas or corridors may be established to help increase the biodiversity in some restored ecosystems. Lupines, as seen here, are important nitrogen-fixing plants. They can easily grow in nutrient-poor soils. As a result, they can make it easier for other plants to establish. Individuals within a system interact with each other, both within and between species. This will cause changes in the dynamics of the population and the community as a whole. Biotic and abiotic factors, both small and large scale processes, will all have an effect on the overall balance of an ecosystem. Thus, it is important to understand the species' role, the species distribution, the interactions that occur between species, and the overall productivity and functioning of an ecosystem in order so that we can better protect and maintain the systems that we have.